Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. I just want to welcome you to this event, especially our virtual viewers. We are so excited to have Will Hossenbein here to present for us. He's got some great information for you. If you are virtual, if you will please drop your first and last name in the chat. That way we know who's here watching with us. That would be awesome. So thank you, and I hope you guys get a lot out of this.
Hey everybody, well, my name is Will and I work here at Wallace State Community College in the tutoring lab, which is on the 8th floor of this building. So I'm the English tutoring coordinator, so I spend a lot of time tutoring in English, kind of helping students, strengthen their writing skills and things like that. So I'm really happy to talk to you all today about writing some scholarship essays. I know it's a lot of fun and you're all really enjoying doing it or enjoying thinking about doing it in the near future. So hopefully we can get some good tips. But I have some little packets I'd placed up there near where you would sign in when you came in. So if you haven't picked up one of those, feel free to do so. It's got some of the tips or all of the tips that we're going to talk about today. And it's also got just some sort of supplementary materials. It's got some of the sample essays that we're going to go over. And then it also has a list of just like some very common or I guess popular scholarship essay prompts that you might run into as you're sort of navigating the process. So yeah, like I said, we're just going to kind of go over some general tips, look at some sample essays, and then I'll hang around. I didn't know if anybody had any essays they were going to bring to get reviewed. That's pretty much what I do a lot, is just review essays and give feedback and things like that. So if any of you happen to bring one, we can do that. Bring it up to me and we can kind of talk about it one-on-one after the presentation's done. Or otherwise, I'll just kind of hang around. And if you have any questions or anything like that, just feel free to ask me. And any time during the presentation, if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand or just holler it out, whatever you prefer. I'm going to check and make sure no one else is waiting to join. Okay, I think we're good. All right, so we've got some good news and bad news. The good news is there's a lot of scholarship funds out there. Just doing any sort of like cursory Google search or something like that, there's a lot of opportunities out there, a lot of scholarships that you can apply to. But you also are going to have to, basically explain it to whoever you're asking for the scholarship money from. They're going to want you to express, in writing, why do you think you should get this scholarship? How do you think it's going to help you in your future, and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of opportunities out there, but you kind of have to learn to, how to ask for it, how to go out there and get it. So that's kind of the main topic we're going to be talking about today, is just 10 tips for writing a successful scholarship essay. And starting off, just right away, tip number one is to start planning early. I know it's kind of seems like a no-brainer or whatever, but it really does, benefit you to start planning as soon as you can for these scholarships, especially if there's an essay component involved. You're definitely going to want to create a calendar with deadlines, and even mention in your calendar some of the requirements that these essays may have for any of the scholarships you wish to pursue. I just did sort of a sample calendar just really quickly on Microsoft Excel. As you can see, we've got, the priority, the scholarship amount, the name of the scholarship requirements, and the deadline. It's kind of up to you how you prioritize it. You can prioritize it by, what the scholarship amount is, or you can sort of prioritize it by, which one's coming up, which one's due the soonest. That's probably what I would do. And that's on I believe the second page of that handout there. I just kind of included it if you want to use that. And of course you can tailor it and, fix that however you want to, so that it's a little bit closer to what you want. So definitely start early and keep a calendar so that you can kind of keep track of all these scholarships as they come up, because you're going to be just hammered with deadlines and things like that, whether it's actually applying to school or, keeping all of your scholarships in in your mind. So just make sure you kind of have a calendar that you're using to follow along with. Tip number 2 for writing a scholarship essay is to know your audience. You want to pay special attention to, questions like who is offering the scholarship. If it's an organization, do some research online, figure out what their mission is. If they have a mission statement online, sort of what their purpose is. You can find this on like the About Us section of the website or something like that. And you want to just make sure you know sort of who it is that's offering the scholarship. And you want to look and see if they're indicating who the ideal candidate is. See if you can find any clues on the website or even on like the scholarship posting itself or the announcement itself, if they can give you any sort of clue as to who the ideal candidate would be. So this is an example. I can't remember where I found this. It was just a random one that I basically found just by Googling like scholarships, but it's called the Bo Mitchell Memorial Scholarship. It's based on academic achievement, strong moral character, concern for others, and strongly oriented outdoor life. It's also based on financial need, and preference is given to former members of Boy Scouts of America or out-of-state students. So obviously this is a really specific scholarship. Down there at the bottom, you'll notice it's because now that I think Girl Scouts USA and Boy Scouts of America is all the same organization. So technically anybody could apply for it. But I just wanted to pull this as kind of a random example. I don't even remember what state this is from, but just to kind of show you the things to look at when you're investigating scholarships, just so you kind of know who the audience is, who the people are that's going to be reading the essay that you eventually write. So one thing they're looking for is they want you to talk about academic achievement, strong moral character, concern for others, and strongly oriented outdoor life. So, if you're someone that just hates the outdoors and that's totally not your, what you're interested in doing, then obviously you want to pass this scholarship by. But let's say you're trying to apply for every single scholarship you conceivably could, that you could, make a case for that you might be a good recipient of it. Well, in your essay response, whatever the question is that they ask, make sure you mention some of these kind of things like, oh, I really enjoy being outdoors. My GPA in high school is this. I've, some sort of example of how you have a strong moral character, things like that. But they also are talking about financial need in this scholarship. So definitely, feel free to bring up if you have any sort of financial need. Some scholarships will say that they're not need-based. So if you're reading that in the essay responses, there's an essay for a scholarship that's not need-based. Basically, you don't necessarily have to talk about financial need. Now, you still can if you want to, but if that's the case, you might want to focus on some of the other things. Then, of course, like I said, this is a very specific one for, if you're a former member of the Boy Scouts of America or Girl Scouts of the USA. So it may not apply to most people. Here's another example of a scholarship. This is from the Southern Automotive Women's Forum. And this is a scholarship essay for designed for women who are enrolled in a STEM field, so science, technology, engineering, math, something like that, who's planning on enrolling in one of those types of fields at either a 2-year school or a 4-year school, and they're interested in the automobile and mobility industry. So again, if this is a scholarship you're thinking about applying for, you've gone to the website, you've looked at these things, you just want to keep these sort of in the back of your mind as you're getting ready to write your essay. And even if, let's say you're wanting to get a degree in mathematics or engineering or something like that. So you're definitely eligible for this scholarship. And they're saying, we're giving preference to those who are interested in the automobile industry. Well, you're not going to be beholden to that necessarily, just because you apply for this particular scholarship. And if you happen to get it, it's okay if you change your major later on, or if, you wind up not, you do get that major, but you wind up not working in the automobile industry. That's totally fine, but it's still something you want to mention in your essay. Just say, I'm all about cars and I really want to work in the automotive industry. Basically, you just want to know who the audience is and make sure you're sort of playing to whatever whatever they are looking for in a candidate. Tip number 3 is basically just read the instructions really carefully. So I mean, obviously you're going to read the prompt, but make sure you really understand what it is they're talking about. And we're going to look at some sample prompts here in a second. Make sure you know for sure what it is they want you to discuss. And also really important is looking at the formatting requirements. So there'll always be, well, I guess not always, but there'll normally be some sort of like length requirement. So, 300 words, 300 to 500 words, something like that. So make sure you're not coming in drastically underneath those length requirements, or you're not going way over it, because they're not going to read, a novel more than likely. And then just make sure you've got the font type and the size and all that good stuff the way they want it as well. A lot of times students will get so excited, or well, maybe not excited is the term, but they'll get so involved in answering the prompt that they may forget to pay attention to some of these formatting requirements. So again, just make sure that that's something that you pay a lot of attention to. Tip number 4 is just make sure you're being unique. Don't be afraid to be personal. These scholarship reviewers, they're wanting to get to know you. They're thinking about, giving you a scholarship that's going to help you in college. So they want to know who it is that they're sorry, let me admit this person. So they're wanting to know, what you're like as a person. Are you going to be, a good student, or a good, candidate of receiving the scholarship? So the reviewers definitely want to get to know you. So, feel free to let them. Give some personal anecdotes in your essays, talk about your life and how this scholarship will, impact it and things like that. Don't be afraid to be personal, essentially. And also, make sure the tone of your writing is sort of confident, and you want to sound proud, but you don't want to sound arrogant or braggy. So definitely, be proud of your accomplishments, and let that, show through, but don't just be totally like, I'm the greatest, most awesome person in the world. And just don't be arrogant, essentially. And we'll talk about that a little bit more here in a second too, which kind of bleeds into tip number 5 as well. Avoid sounding overly negative or pessimistic. Sometimes if you're, if you are kind of telling a personal story, or talking about sort of your life, and if you're talking about maybe some experiences that you've gone through, try your best, be realistic, be personable, be unique, all that kind of stuff, but try not to sound overly negative. It's always better to come off as humble because of your accomplishments or your experiences, rather than, arrogant because of your accomplishments and experiences. So just kind of as a general rule of thumb, avoid sounding negative if at all possible. And the last tip regarding just sort of the pre-writing stage, the sort of general getting ready to start researching some of these scholarships, is feel free to recycle old essays that you used. A lot of times, a lot of scholarships will kind of ask you very similar questions. What life experiences have you had? What, in what ways will this scholarship help you to succeed? Is education important to you? Things like that. And so you can recycle certain pieces of older essays you've written, and, submit them for these other ones. But be careful. Be sure you recycle them, but you're not necessarily reusing the same ones over and over. Because even though you can reuse certain pieces of certain essays, you don't want to basically just send the same essay for different scholarships, because you want it to be unique and tailored to each individual one. So kind of with those tips in mind, let's look at this sample prompt. And this is just kind of a basic narrative prompt that you might run into, where it's pretty simple. It's just like, submit an original essay of 300 words about how this scholarship will help you to succeed. And then, of course, the formatting requirements are here. They want it to be in Times New Roman. They want it to be 12-point font and double spaced. So just make sure you always pay attention to the formatting requirements. But like I said, this is just sort of a generic narrative type essay. How will this scholarship help you to succeed? So the tip number 7 is to always create an outline when you're getting ready to write one of these essays. Some people, don't do an outline. They just go right into writing, which is fine. I mean, a lot of times you can sort of just do some free writing, and that's a really good way of getting the ideas sort of out of your head and onto the paper. But for scholarship essays, you really want to be sort of succinct and you want to stay on track. You don't want to go sort of rambling in a bunch of different directions. So creating an outline can really help you sort of stay organized as you're beginning to think about how to answer the essay prompt. So you want to create a simple outline that's going to include the thesis statement. There's some supporting sentences that back up or sort of illustrate the main point of your thesis statement. And they can also include examples and quotes and things like that. And then you want to have your conclusion in your outline as well. And I think in your packet, there's a sample outline. So this is just sort of a blank sample outline that you can do. Obviously, you don't have to do Roman numerals. You can do like bullet points or, any other kind of methods that you want to do. But you've got your introduction, which is going to include the thesis statement. And the thesis statement is just what the main point of your essay is. So in a narrative essay, like the prompt we just had, the thesis statement is going to be something about how this particular scholarship that you're applying to is going to have an impact on your life and how it's going to like help you, achieve your goals. And then you will just list about 2 or 3 supporting points, and then you'll have your conclusion. So this is one that I just kind of came up with, and I think this is the one that's actually in your packet. Just as sort of a response to the prompt, submit an original essay of 300 words about how this scholarship will help you to succeed. You want the thesis to basically answer whatever question or whatever issue is raised in the prompt. So for this one, the thesis statement is going to be, receiving this scholarship will make a tremendous difference in my life and will help me to succeed because it will help finance my goal of becoming a college graduate and bettering my life. So for the next several sections of the outline, you want to list basically what are the supporting details that are kind of backing up the point that you make in the thesis statement. For this particular essay, the person is talking about, having to witness, their parents did not go to college. And so sort of witnessing them struggle was sort of served as an example to this scholarship applicant. So therefore, Roman numeral 3, they decided to really work hard academically and focus on their grades and extracurriculars and things like that to try and get to the point where they can go to college. And that helped them kind of realize their goal of getting a college degree, determining what they wanted to major in, and then sort of the reasons for that. And then the conclusion is where you basically kind of come full circle, tie it back into the thesis statement and the main points that you make in the introduction. So, and we're going to actually read through the essay response here in a second, but tip number 8 is to use a conventional essay format. So you want to have an introduction section, you want to have a body section, and you want to have a conclusion section. And in the intro, you always want to include your thesis statement, like I said. Make sure, normally it's going to come at the end of the introduction, and it's basically going to articulate what the overall theme or point of your essay is. You want to keep the introduction short. Remember, it's just an introduction. You're kind of, literally introducing the reader to the main point of your essay, and you're going to go into further detail in the body of your essay. And so the next part of the essay is going to be the body, where you try to make about 3 noticeable points. In this narrative essay, it's not necessarily points that the student will be making, but it's sort of maybe examples from their life or something like that. Depending on the word limits, each point can constitute a few sentences, or each point could be an entire paragraph of its own. Since this is a 300-word essay, more than likely, the introduction will be a couple of sentences. Each of the sort of body segments will be a few sentences each, and then the conclusion may be 1 sentence. Whereas if it was, a 700-word essay, you might devote a paragraph to each one of these points. And then lastly, the conclusion is where, you don't want to start with in conclusion, but you can start with some sort of other transitional phrase like as you can see, or ultimately, or in the end, or something like that. It's just for whatever reason, scholarship reviewers really don't like to read in conclusion in an essay. Not really sure why. Same goes for English instructors too. A lot of times they'll say, don't write in conclusion. But you can say, like I said, ultimately, or as you can see, or something like that. And then the final part of your conclusion is going to be your so what, or your significance statement, where you're basically saying, okay, here's all the stuff that I've been telling you about myself. So what? It's basically your final, like, here's my final word. This is the final idea I want you to take away from my essay. That's the so what statement. So that's how the conclusion will end. So in this example, and this is on the next page in your packet, this is sort of taking the essay from the outline and then putting it in actual essay format. And I'm gonna read along, but I'm gonna have this screen up where I've got it highlighted so you can kind of see how it matches up with the outline versus what the final essay, I guess, structure is gonna be. You know, you start with the introduction, then you've got your 3 main points, and then you end with the conclusion. So for this one, again, the prompt was submit an essay of about 300 words about how this scholarship will help you to succeed. So you start out with the introduction, and again, since it's kind of a shorter essay, the intro and the thesis and all that is basically going to be part of the same sentence. So you start out by saying, or they start out by saying, receiving this scholarship will make a tremendous difference in my life and will help me to succeed because it will help finance my goal of becoming a college graduate and bettering my life. Let me admit Cole to the room. All right. When I was growing up, I often watched my parents struggle to make ends meet financially. My parents were never able to pursue an education after high school because they could not afford the cost of tuition. Although they always provided the best life that they could for my siblings and I, it was hard for me to watch my parents struggle to pay the bills each month, work tirelessly at their multiple jobs, and make personal sacrifices so that we could have more opportunities than they had. My parents' example impressed on me the importance of higher education to better one's life. Therefore, I resolved at a young age to work hard in school, apply myself in extracurricular activities, and do everything I could to ensure that I would have opportunities to pursue a college degree after I graduated high school. And now this is the part where we're sort of transitioning into, you know, the third point of talking about getting the goal of getting a college degree. My goal is to graduate with a degree in business administration so I can find a good job after I graduate and one day own my own business. I want to repay my parents for all the sacrifices they made for me when I was growing up, and I want to be able to provide my future family with opportunities that I never had. While I have worked extremely hard to succeed academically and prepare for college, the high cost of tuition, books, and other fees associated with higher education are still obstacles in my path to success. Being able to use the funds from this scholarship to pay for my college education will help me to achieve my goals of graduating college and bettering my life, both professionally and personally. So again, this is just kind of a generic essay response that I came up with to this prompt that I found online. That's kind of a common prompt you might run into. So if this was an essay that you were writing, you know, feel free to put in a lot more personal, you know, examples if you want to, if you feel comfortable with it. I mentioned in this one, you know, watching my parents struggle each month. But if you wanted, you know, if in your life, if you had an example of something a little bit more specific or concrete that you wanted to put in there, you certainly could. Kind of going back to the whole, you know, make it unique, make sure you kind of stand out to the people that are reviewing the essay. But basically, that's the basic structure you want to use regardless of what type of essay it is. You want to have some sort of segment here at the beginning that serves as sort of your introduction. You want to make around 3 points, hopefully, in the essay. And then you want to end with a strong conclusion where you kind of tie it back into the introduction and the thesis that you say at the beginning, and end with your final sort of so what or significance statement. So, and by the way, I tend to talk kind of fast. So does anyone have any questions so far? I feel like I haven't paused and like checked in with it. Is everyone doing okay so far? Awesome. All right, cool. So let's look at another one. This is going to be another narrative. Again, most of the scholarship essays you'll run into will have some sort of narrative aspect to them. And they're all going to be kind of similar. Let me make sure. Okay, I thought I got a notification here. Okay. So this is another narrative. Why do you want to go to college? Why is it important to you? And this one's a little bit longer. They're wanting 300 to 500 words. But again, they want it Times New Roman, 12-point font. and double spaced. So we're going to definitely pay attention to those formatting requirements. So for this one, this is actually one that I found online that a student, can't remember where it was, but this is an actual student's essay that they submitted to get the scholarship that they got to go to the college that they went to. So let's take a look at how they structured this one. So again, the prompt is, why do you want to go to college and why is it important to you? The thesis statement that they came up with is college is important because it's necessary in order for me to achieve my goals or dreams. So kind of similar to the other essay. And again, that's what I was talking about. You can kind of recycle some stuff from other essay scholarship applications. Then they go right into their main points, their childhood had structure. They talk about basically examples from their childhood. Then they move on to how sort of noticing how college helped other members of their families. And then how it sort of shaped their view of education. And then they conclude with how they're excited about the next chapter, and they end with why college is important to them, which again is what what the main question was. So let's just look at this essay response, and this is the next one in your packet. I'll have it pulled up here so you can kind of see the colors and how it corresponds. And if you'll notice, this one they kind of switched a little bit. Their intro/thesis comes at the end of the first paragraph, but they actually started with their talking about their childhood. And it's okay sometimes to do that, as long as you keep it chronological. Like as long as you have some sort of order to it, it's okay to start off right off the bat with sort of a personal anecdote, or talking about your childhood or talking about life experiences, as long as you always tie it back into the thesis and answer the prompt of the essay. And again, as long as it's in order, because they talk about childhood, then they talk about how basically, as you'll see, they talk about going into high school, then they talk about how they want to go to college. So they still kind of have that general structure there. So the question again was, why do you want to go to college? Why is it important to you? And they start out, as a child, my life had structure. Coloring books had lines, letters took on very specific shapes, and a system of rules governed everything from board games to the classroom. I found comfort in the fact that my future had an easy to follow template: elementary, middle, and high school, college, job, family, retirement, happily ever after ending. When I graduated from elementary school, I was told I completed 25% of my education. During my middle school graduation, I was told I was halfway there, and I know I'll be told I'm 75% done when I throw my cap in the air this June. College was always factored into the percentage and the overall formula for life, and I never questioned its importance. I always figured it's important because it is necessary. So see how at the sort of the end of the introduction, they kind of start answering that question prompt. Going to college makes sense. From helping my parents land stable jobs after coming to America, to giving my brother the chance to gain work experience at some of the top financial firms, college educations have shown their worth in my family. Yet I didn't think about what actually goes on inside the magical universities until I entered high school. Applying to the Academy for Math, Science, and Engineering was the first time I had actively made a decision in my education. With the encouragement of my parents and favorite science teacher, who recognized that I would excel in the challenging environment of like-minded students, I applied. 4 years later, I can confidently say they were right. My class of 26 has shown me the benefits of a collaborative rather than a competitive environment, especially the impact that camaraderie with my peers has on collective learning experience. Each student has an inspiring level of passion and motivation that made me excited to learn, work on projects, and participate in discussions both in and out of the classroom. I use my education to gain skills and open doors for myself, such as an internship at my local hospital. And see how they're kind of working in this sort of, here's something cool that I've done that's, sounds kind of impressive to a college scholarship committee. I gained confidence in my abilities to communicate with individuals, from strangers my age to practicing professionals. I was thinking longer and harder than I ever had before to solve individual problems and large-scale challenges. In all honesty, I was having fun. So this is, again, they're talking about their high school experience and how it kind of made them value education. Looking back on my years at the academy, I realized how big of an impact the school made on how I view education. I wasn't coming to school to mark another day off my calendar and inch closer to finishing the next 25%. I came to school to learn and question and push myself. Now, as a senior, I'm excited. I'm thankful for the sample that my high school gave me of what learning is supposed to be like, and thankful that it left me wanting more. I'm entering college in August with a new understanding of its importance. It is important because it is what I want for my future. So even though in the middle there, they're almost rambling a little bit about their school experience, but they're able to kind of work in, oh, I had this experience working at a local hospital, and I really, my grades really improved, and I came to really value education. And then in the end, they really kind of drive the point home and go back to the overall question, which is, why do you want to go to college, and why is it important to you? And so as you can kind of tell, this was a little bit longer of an essay, but still, with the exception of kind of switching the first two components there, they still stick to this very sort of formulaic, like point A to point B to point C. Let's start with the intro. Let's have our three sort of main points that we're going to talk about. And then let's end with, a strong conclusion that sort of definitively, answers the prompt. Okay.
So he has asked, does diction and grammar affect the overall essay?
Yes, for sure. And that was going to be sort of the last tip or two I talk about, is going to be editing and revising. And that's, yeah, so it's incredibly important. You definitely want to make sure your grammar is perfect and the punctuation is perfect. You want to make sure the tone is appropriate and all that kind of stuff. And so that's I'm directly about to talk about that. So yes, grammar, punctuation, very important. Always, proofread your essays after you write them, and always get at least one other person to read through them as well. Because yeah, they're gonna, you can have the most, profound thoughts in the world, but if no one can read them, or if it's kind of a chore to read them, then, you can kind of suspect that the scholarship reviewers, they may toss out that essay. So yeah, excellent question. You definitely want to pay attention to diction and grammar. And what I mean by diction or tone, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. When you look at the organizations that are offering the scholarship, kind of see what they're looking for. If it's a more formal, like, this is Daughters of the American Revolution, and we want you to talk about, why patriotism is important. You don't want to have an informal kind of, lackadaisical tone or something like that. You want it to be very, almost academic sounding. But if it's like I can't think of a good example, but if it's, a less formal organization, then you can kind of loosen up the tone a little bit and make it a little bit more personable. So yeah, those two things definitely are important when it comes to writing essays, for sure. And we've got, let's see, I have a third example here. And we'll go ahead, since we've got a little bit of time, we'll go ahead and do this one too. This is, so far we've talked about two, were there any other questions, by the way? Sorry, I just told you. Okay. So we've talked about two like narrative type essays that are very common. You're almost guaranteed to run into that kind of essay when you're applying for scholarships. But there may be some that are more argumentative. Again, I think this is going to kind of be in the minority. You're not going to have a whole lot of these types of scholarship essay requirements. But if you ever do run into one, especially if it's maybe like that's all right. It gives me time to take a sip of water. That's true. Yeah. I used all the memes at the beginning. I should have like sprinkled some throughout just to kind of keep it light. But anyways, but let's say, if it's like a really, really extremely competitive scholarship, they may want you to do a little bit more than just a personal narrative. They may want you to kind of demonstrate that hey, I can, I have opinions and I can argue points and things like that. So we'll look at this one real quickly. Again, it's, the content of it doesn't necessarily matter, but I just want to kind of show you again, focusing on the sort of structure of the essays and all that good stuff. So for this one, and this is going to be the last sample essay in your packet. This is an argumentative prompt, and it says, in recent years, technological advancement and the proliferation of social media have changed the ways in which people interact. Many social interactions that used to take place in physical places now take place online or through other digital platforms. In an original essay of 300 to 500 words, reflect on this trend and explain why you consider this to be a good thing or a bad thing. And then, of course, we've got the formatting requirements there. Times New Roman, 12-point font, and double spaced. So this one, they're presenting an issue to you, and they're wanting you to basically take a stance on it and argue whether or not you agree or disagree. So here's an example of how this student, and this is an actual essay again, this is from a Wallace student that I was working with this semester, just doing sample essays and things like that. And he said it was okay if I use this. So this is sort of an example of how he organized his thoughts. He's got his thesis there, like we always want to do. He's got his, and his thesis is that technology supported venues allow more people into the fold and foster social connections because online attendance is more convenient. It offers a shared experience and it reaches a larger viewership than ever before. So he's got his main point there that technology is basically a good thing because it's helping foster more social connections. And then he's got the 3 reasons why, and that's what he's going to sort of organize the body part of his essay about. So supporting reason 1, why technology is good, it makes access more convenient. Reason 2, it allows more people to share their experiences. Reason 3, it can reach more people than, I guess, no technology at all. And then the conclusion. So in this one, I think in the packet I've got it in like paragraph form, but this one I just shrunk so it would fit on this one page. But we'll just read through this really quickly and see how he structured his introduction and his thesis, sticks to his 3 main points, and then returns with his conclusion. So throughout the years, public events have offered community and fellowship. However, they have been somewhat confined to local audiences. Thanks to recent advancements in technology, events and celebrations can be more widely attended. Although some may say that experiencing events on TV, the internet, and social media promotes isolation, I would argue that technology-supported venues allow more people into the fold and foster social connections. So that's that's basically his thesis right there. And he starts out, it's oftentimes good in an argumentative type essay to kind of acknowledge the opposition and then explain, what your counter argument is basically. So he said, some people may say that, social media can make people isolated, but I would argue that it actually allows more people to sort of come into the fold. A physical presence is no longer required for events because online attendance is more convenient. It offers a shared experience and it reaches a larger viewership than ever before. All right, and so now he's going into his main point 1 that's supporting why he thinks technology is good. Access to events is more convenient due to the availability of devices such as tablets, phones, gaming consoles, and even some cars. This ease is increased by Wi-Fi, allowing people to wirelessly view events from almost anywhere in the world. A perk of this near universal access is viewership from home is much cheaper than in person. Next, the creation of social media. And so you see how he's using these transitional words like next, later he says finally. Basically, he's kind of signaling to the scholarship reviewer that, here's my next point, this is my next point. You kind of, as opposed to a narrative essay that's a little bit more, I would say, organic, a little bit more kind of free-flowing or whatever. With an argumentative essay, you really want to kind of stay on point and like signal to the reader, okay, there's my first point, here's my next point, etc. So next, the creation of social media allows a wide range of shared experiences. Several venues, including Facebook, Twitter, and Reddit, help provide platforms for people to discuss shared viewership experiences. Additionally, Twitch, Discord, FaceTime, and Skype enable people from across the globe to create specialized communities where they can talk in real time while using video, text, or voice chat as events unfold. Finally, modern communication advancements allow a broader reach than ever before. People who would often be excluded from events and celebrations, including the terminally ill, elderly, deployed, quarantined, or disabled, are just a click or button press away from joining in on any event. Some of these events might include weddings, graduations, support groups, reunions, etc. And now he's going into the conclusion. Conclusively, And I said, don't use in conclusion. He kind of tried to get around that by saying conclusively. I probably would have said something like in the end or ultimately or something like that. But ultimately, physical attendance at events and celebrations is not necessary in the modern era because it is easier to participate from the comfort of one's own home. Online viewership enables interactions with a small or large community, and virtual viewing vitalizes events to viewers that previously never had access. So again, this is a much longer essay prompt, much more like formal. But as you can tell, the tone that he uses is a little bit more formal as well. It's not like just a personal narrative about your life experiences. He's actually making an argument and following it up with key points, but he still uses the sort of like, point A, point B, point C, very well organized essay. So if you ever do come across one that's a little bit more formal like this, and especially if it's wanting you to be argumentative, just make sure again that outline is so important because it really helps you organize your thoughts and kind of stay on track that way. There we go. Okay, so that was just sort of a crash course in like some common essay prompts and how you can sort of go about organizing your thoughts and structuring your essays to respond to them. So picking back up with the tips that we were talking about, tip number 9 is going to be edit and revise. So the first thing you want to do is just kind of take a break, clear your mind, kind of reset everything. This is after you've written your first draft. I guess I should have mention that. So after you've written your first draft, you've done your outline, you've got your rough draft written, take a break and just kind of clear your mind. It's always easier to revise and edit a document after you've taken a break because if you start editing it right after you wrote it, you're still kind of in the mindset of the writer. You still know what you're trying to say in your mind, but what you're trying to say in your mind may not necessarily be reflected on the page. So if you take some time, kind of step back and then go back to it later, that the difference there might be a little bit more clear. And plus the scholarship reviewers, they're going to be reading it with fresh eyes and they won't know what your own sort of internal thoughts are. All they'll know is what's written on the page. So after you've written it, take some time, take a little break, just kind of clear your mind, and then go back and if possible, it's best if you can print out your draft. At least, and maybe I'm just old school. I am for sure. But for me, it's easier if I print it out, get like a piece of paper, get a pen and actually, mark it up. If you say, oh, that word is misspelled or I left an S off of there, whatever. To me, it just kind of helps, again, taking it from the screen onto an actual piece of paper. To me, it's just a little bit easier to pick up on if there's any mistakes or anything like that. Because a lot of times if it's on the screen, it's easier to just kind of skim and gloss over whatever it is that you're looking at. But when you're editing and revising, the first thing you want to look at is the bigger picture items. And what I mean by that is, did I answer the prompt correctly? Does my essay make sense? Is the organization like linear and chronological, or do I go off in tangents? Basically, you want to kind of take a step back and just look at the essay like as a whole. And make sure that that there's there's nothing majorly wrong going on. You also want to make sure that it's clear. Did you get your point across clearly and accurately? And then you want to see, are there any areas here that I can strengthen? I mentioned, watching my parents struggle as I was growing up, but I didn't really give a clear example. Maybe I can go back and add this particular memory I have or something like that. Just kind of looking at the bigger picture items first. And once you've looked at the bigger picture and you feel pretty good, like, okay, I think I've added pretty much all I can add. I think it answers the prompt really well. Then you want to focus in and start looking at the grammar, punctuation, formatting, stuff like that. Always look at the bigger picture first and then focus in on the smaller picture items. And okay, I skipped that. Yeah, bigger picture editing is, like I said, clarity, strength. Did I answer the prompt? Smaller picture editing. You can use the spelling and grammar check functions on your word processor. More than likely, you're probably doing that all along as you're writing anyways. You can also use helpful websites. I know a lot of students I've worked with like to use Grammarly and things like that just to kind of do a grammar check. But always look at it yourself, proofread it yourself, and always get at least one other person to proofread it for you too. Because a lot of times, even though the software and websites are great, a lot of times they'll miss things because they're just not human, and we haven't yet created computers that can replace us, but you never know. And the main things when you're looking at the smaller picture editing, the main things that you need to focus on are commas, run-ons, and sentence fragments. And I say that just because working in the tutoring lab here at Wallace, those are the main issues that I see students have, just like in their English 101 classes. So those are really the most common grammar mistakes and punctuation mistakes that pop up. So make sure, commas, you're gonna use them mostly to join clauses. I won't go into all these boring details right now, but if you want to stick around, I'd be happy to. But basically commas, make sure if you got commas in your sentence, make sure they're either joining clauses together or they're separating items in a series. Run-on sentences, of course, are just really long, rambling sentences that don't have any punctuation. So if you're reading through your essay and you're like, okay, this sentence is like 3.5, 4 lines long, and there's no commas or anything in it, that's normally a good indication you need to go back and make sure everything's okay. Another good rule of thumb to remember with run-on sentences, if the subject of your sentence changes, so if you start out your sentence talking about yourself, and then you end it talking about someone else or something else, that's normally a good indication that it's a run-on sentence. So you need to go back and put in the appropriate, punctuation there, whether it's a comma or semicolon or whatever. And then the final thing to look at as far as like small picture editing goes is sentence fragments. And of course, these are just incomplete sentences that are missing either a subject or a verb. So you don't want to have super long run-on sentences, and you don't want to have incomplete sentences. And those are really the 3 main items that I think students tend to run into issues with the most. And so that's pretty much all for tip number 9. Tip number 10 is just to treat yourself, Self-care is important. You want to make sure make sure you're treating yourself. So whenever you're done, you've edited it, you've had a friend read over it and look at it, and you feel confident, you're ready to submit it. Take some time, try to recharge your batteries, both literally and figuratively, and go do something you enjoy. Try to relax a little bit, because this stuff, it's stressful, and it's it can be kind of a pain. So celebrate the small victories whenever you get an essay done. Treat yourself a little bit. Does anyone here watch Parks and Recreation? Okay, good. Because as I was making this, I was like, you know what? I may be old, like they may not even know what this is, and so they're just gonna be like, what? This makes no sense. Okay, but at least some of you recognize it. It's from a really funny episode of Parks and Recreation. So, but those are basically the 10 tips. Also in your packet, I think I mentioned at the beginning, I included just a list of the 16 most popular application scholarship essay questions. And they give you some suggestions for how to answer those as well. So I knew I wouldn't really have time to get into all of them. So just review that in your packets. And does anyone have any questions, or did we have any in the chat? Hey. That's an excellent question. And honestly, it doesn't really matter as long as you're within that limit. I would say the proper word count is whatever it takes for you to basically get your point across and to make sure you've really, answered the prompt and sort of made it unique and made it your own. So, if you're reading it, you get done with your rough draft, you're doing the sort of bigger picture editing, and you think, okay, well, this part, this paragraph is a little bit weak. I need to add some stuff to it. And you've got 350 words written, and you can go up to 500. Well, then okay, I've got some kind of wiggle room to use here. But if you're really obviously pushing it close to the word limit or over the word limit, then you can go back and cut some words out. But really, I don't think there's like a hard rule as far as should you try to be shorter or should you try to be longer. I think as long as you've covered the subject and have sort of made it, given it your own unique style and all that kind of stuff, then you should be good. I know that's kind of a wishy-washy answer, but really, as long as you're within the word requirements, then you kind of have total freedom for how you want it. Yeah, I really don't know. It wouldn't, I mean, it probably just depend on how that scholarship reviewer is feeling that day and all that kind of stuff. Because as long as you meet the requirements, they're going to accept it and read it and all that kind of stuff. I mean, who knows? They may have just read like 50 essays in a row and they're like, oh, thank God, this is only 300 words. So it might be a good thing.
I have a program and I have to read essays every year for scholarships. And we're not really looking at that number per se. That is a guideline, just kind of shorten it up or keep it at a certain pace that we don't want to read 3 or 4 pages. So when we say there's a limit, we're not going through and we're not doing the word count on that. We're looking for the content and however long it takes you to wrap up the thing. So even if you were like 299 or 278. It's not the matter of necessarily the length, as long as you get your point across succinctly. So the reviewer is likely not going to look at the number of words as long as it's not too short or too excessive.
Awesome. It's a good question for sure. Does anyone have any other questions? Anything?
I have a couple of questions from the chat.
Okay.
So we have one that says basically, and I think you touched a little bit on this, but should you work on it little by little over a long period of time or plan out the whole thing before you start writing?
So my recommendation would be try to plan it as much as possible. Like try to go ahead and get an outline, do the outline and try to have it filled out as much as possible. Now, when it comes to writing an essay, sometimes I've noticed like students, they'll say, well, I'm having trouble with the introduction. How can I introduce something that I haven't even written yet? So, and that's a very fair point. So I would say for the outline, go ahead and try to do that as much as possible, or go ahead and do the outline all the way through. And then when you actually start writing it, it's okay if you get stuck at a certain point, then move on, skip to the next paragraph or skip to the next main point or something like that. But as far as actually planning the essay, my recommendation would be, try to be as structured as possible with the outline so you know at least the main points you're going to hit. And then when you start actually writing the draft, you can be a little bit more laissez-faire. That's not the right term, but you can be a little bit more like liberal with it, I guess. But obviously, writing is a subjective thing. So if you're taking my advice and you're doing an outline and you're like, oh, this is just not working for me at all, this is actually confusing me more, then hey, do whatever works best for you. But if you're just totally, unsure how to get started, I think doing the outline and trying to plan as much as possible all at the same time would be best.
There's one more, and you can see what you can make of it. So the question was, does target audience or argumentative/narrative essays affect the passage's clarity? I think.
Let's see.
My interpretation of that, maybe he's asking.
Sure.
No, I read that. No, he said does the target audience, it's almost like he's asking, does the target audience or the essay type
affect? I guess, yeah, Cole, I'll go ahead and answer the question, but if you want to unmute and say it, not have a microphone. Okay, well, so what I think you're asking is, regardless of whether it's argumentative or narrative, what the type of essay is, you always want the clarity you always want it to be as clear as possible. even if it's sort of a narrative essay where you're being a little bit more personal and maybe have a slightly more informal tone, you still want your main point to be as clear as possible. So I would say that argumentative / narrative, it doesn't really matter. You want the passage's clarity to be unaffected, I guess, or you want it to be as clear as possible. And regarding target audience, essentially that's just, looking at what's the name of what type of organization is offering the scholarship. Like, is it through the college itself? Is it through some sort of nonprofit organization or like charity organization? Basically, you want to do a little bit of research and know what the mission statement is, and sort of what the mindset of the people are that are going to be, what the mindset is of the people that are going to be reading your essay. I don't know, that was kind of a bumbling answer, but did that kind of answer your question, Cole, or did you want to, feel free to type if you want to like ask a follow-up question or something like that. Okay. Okay. What was that one?
Okay. So she says, if you aren't good at making up a thesis statement, what would be the best way to start them?
So that's an excellent question. Basically, with the thesis statement, you always want to go back to what the prompt is. And if you're having trouble coming up with exactly what you want it to say, just try to read the prompt and like answer it. Just pretend like someone is asking you that question. So if the prompt is like, how is this scholarship going to help you? How will the scholarship help you, achieve your goals or whatever? Just answer it the way you would if you were talking to a normal, just talking to someone in front of you. And then you can always kind of refine it and make it a little bit more formal before you actually do your final essay or your final draft of the essay. But basically, think of the thesis as this is the main point that I want to get across, and you want it to answer whatever question is being asked in the prompt. So did that kind of answer the question? And as far as like getting started, having trouble coming up with a thesis, I mean, the best thing to do for me, again, I'm kind of old school, but I will literally just get like a scratch piece of paper and a pen and just start trying to write, just come up with any ideas. I didn't really talk a whole lot about pre-writing. Well, I did as far as the outline goes, but even before you come up with the outline, you can just basically just do what's called free writing, which is where you just literally have a blank document or blank page and you just write whatever comes to mind, thinking about the topic at hand. So I would say to get started on the thesis, just look at the prompt and then just start free writing, trying to get everything out of your mind onto the piece of paper. And then eventually, once you get a lot of that stuff out there, you can kind of tweak it and refine it and turn it into an actual, grammatically correct sentence that's going to serve as your thesis statement. So, and a lot of times the free writing part might even take as long as writing the actual essay, because especially for like an argumentative essay or something like that, where it's going to require several components, you want to spend a lot of time doing that free writing. So, is there another question?
One more question.
Okay.
So he has said, how would sampling and citing outside sources affect the essay? Would you recommend using your own experiences and those around you, or outside combined with closer experiences?
Okay, that's an excellent question. So it would depend on the type of essay prompt. So if it's just a straight up narrative, like, tell us about your life experiences, tell us about how education is important to you or something like that, I wouldn't recommend using outside sources because, again, they're just kind of wanting to get to know you and like what you're like as a person, what your experiences are going to be. But let's say it's more of an argumentative type essay and they're wanting you to like make a point about a subject or argue a point. In that case, I think you certainly can use outside sources. Statistics are always good. If you're like in the one we did about technology, if he could have gone, online and found some stats about like how many people or how many hours a day people spend on social media or something like that, I think that's certainly fine because it kind of demonstrates to the scholarship reviewers that you know how to do research, and you know how to sort of synthesize information and stuff like that. So I would say if it's a more argumentative or like explanatory essay where they're wanting you to have a very formal academic tone and either make an argument or explain something, then you can definitely use outside sources if you want to. But if it's a more narrative, personal essay, I wouldn't do that because it, again, going back to kind of tone and diction, it would be kind of a weird juxtaposition of like, here's some personal experiences and then here's a statistic from an outside source or something like that. So I would say just go back and read the prompt really carefully. And if you can determine what type of prompt it is, then that can tell you whether you want to use outside sources or not. Yes. Yeah, well, I mean, I guess that would go back to reading the formatting requirements and what they want. I mean, I work with students all the time, English 101 and 102 students, and I'm like, cite everything, always cite it because you don't want to get accused of plagiarism. So yeah, I mean, if you're going to include outside sources, you may not necessarily have to do like an MLA in-text citation, but you could say, according to the Pew Research Center, comma, and then have your quote. I would definitely use some sort of signal phrase like that to introduce the information, but I don't think you'd necessarily have to do like a works cited page and stuff like that. But I guess, check the instructions and make sure they don't specify that. But it's a good question. Yes. That's a good question, because you don't want it, because like I said, you don't want to sound like arrogant or braggy or whatever, but you do want to talk about your accomplishments and how you are a good candidate for this position, for this scholarship. So I would say don't make any claims that are exaggerated beyond what you've already said in the essay. So for example, in the conclusion, if you're going to say, I believe I deserve this scholarship because I'm, an excellent student. Make sure that you have something in your essay backing that up, like in the body part. Make sure you've mentioned like your GPA or, something that kind of demonstrates that you do have sort of the quality that you're talking about. So I guess that would be my advice, would be to keep from sounding like super self-indulgent or full of yourself. Just make sure you can basically back up all your claims with some sort of example from the essay. Yeah, I think so.
I'd like to add something to that. You may be the most deserving person for that particular scholarship. It's important though to, and this is what I've always told my students in the past, make it about how you're going to give back to the community that you're going to serve. If I was to receive this scholarship, I would be able to then go on to serve my community in this way, so that you turn something away from yourself. Not I'm the most deserving, but if I had this opportunity, I would do X with it. You see what I'm saying? So it takes that whole like, I'm worthy, I've done X, Y, and Z, and I deserve this. And you turn it into a way of how you're going to give back and how you're going to serve others with that opportunity.
Another question in the chat. So it's been asked, what is the main thing in an essay that readers don't like? So how you said, not to use in conclusion. Are there any other examples that you can give, maybe of things to avoid?
I would say, basically kind of going into what the last question was about, you don't want to sound completely self-centered or arrogant. I think if you go back to what Todd was saying about, talk about how you would use this scholarship to give back to the community or give back to your school or whatever. So basically, yeah, aside from sort of, I guess, cliche phrases like in conclusion, you wouldn't want to, basically, you don't want to make yourself sound just completely self-centered and arrogant. You want to say, you want to sound confident, but still sort of humble, if that makes sense. would y'all have anything to add to that?
I mean, I think you can kind of do both, you know, how you were talking about, state all the things that you've done. So for example, you know, I'm always preaching to you guys about community service and doing things to be involved in your community. So if you're saying I did X, Y, and Z, you can then turn around and say, you know, I would continue to do that at the university or whatever. So basically an example of what you have been doing, how you can continue to do that to kind of bring those values and that work ethic and that character with you to your, you know, your new college community. But I don't know the specific words. Other audience questions? Let's see if anybody else has any questions in the chat. Those of you who are using the Scholarly app, if you're not a senior yet, you may not know what Scholarly is. It is a scholarship search engine app that we have started using. Those of you who are seniors who are using that, what are the majority of those scholarships like? Do they seem like mostly narrative, more like personal stories, what they're looking for? Have you seen any argumentative prompts?
Everybody using virtual job shadow? Cool. Thank you. The scholarship application portion will be releasing sometime this October. They didn't give me a specific date range. So if you are a junior and you don't have that scholar, you can start using that app from DJS. And that will also build with your personal profile. Stay with it.
Anybody have any other questions? Okay.
I just put in here if there are no other questions.
Well, I want to say thank you to everybody that's here. You're taking it seriously and you're getting prepared and you're doing the legwork that it takes to find these scholarships and prepare yourself to write a great essay. So a big high five, air five, pat yourself on the back for being motivated. You're the ones who are going to do the work to get those scholarships because you're taking it seriously. So big props to you. And give this girl here a hand. I appreciate her doing all the work to make this happen.
If you're a senior, I want everybody to know him talking about virtual job shadow made me think of it. You have a link in your VJS account called Senior Resources. There is a lot of good information in there, one of which is a scholarship tracker. So much like the one that Will showed us, you can write down all of the scholarships that you want to apply for. You can keep up with when the deadlines are, whether or not you've submitted your essay for that particular one yet. If you don't have a printer at home and you need me to print that and bring that to you, let me know. Same for our virtual viewers. If you guys need a copy of that, let me know. But once again, thank you all for coming, and I hope that you learned something. I learned something, so thank you, Will.
And let's give Will a big round
Yes,
of applause for being here. And I owe you topics.
I'll take it.
Yeah. You did the Tupas.
I have not.
Oh,
It's
it's
on my
so good.
list.
Dude,
It's so good.
it's so good.
That's the one here.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I've been meaning to go.
It's so good.
I actually live in here. Yeah.
Do you?
Mhm.
All right, we'll holler at you.
Okay.
The tacos just for helping us out.
All right.
It's
We'll
on
do.
Friday.
How about this Friday?
That works.
Because I'm gonna eat